and etc. Well, there's a section in it that talks about who you can hire and what the requirements for hiring are, or at least some basic ones that you need to include in your policy. And it had formally delineated the current state and federal law. You can't discriminate based on race, religion, age, sex, whatever. Excuse me, I believe that's gender. So there's the 7 federally protected classes that were specifically spelled out. And we had a board member that made a resolution to add sexual orientation to that list. Now, through some of the connections I have, I learned that this is what happened in California and Colorado, where they added sexual orientation and gender identity, and you are no longer able to differentiate between who could use what restroom. That's a major problem. Now, this was in hiring. It wasn't specific to the students. But there was some major concerns with that. One being that we're a policy-making body, not a legislative body, not a constitutional body, or not a body that has authority to make constitutional law and to determine protected classes. And so to say that we had the right and the authority to just add a protected class in policy seemed to be going way beyond our constitutional bounds as a board, and for that reason alone, I'm glad that we voted it down. Now, there's also some other concerns. Another one being that it was in a place in the rules that would have applied to Christian schools, to any religious exemption school, because it would have applied to the 08 schools. And so you would no longer be able to say, you know, the way it was presented, you'd no longer be able to say, okay, here's our covenant of faith. We want you to sign a statement that you will support and uphold traditional family values. And we include in that marriage of one man and one woman. That would be differentiating their hiring based on their sexual orientation. So it would have affected what religious exemption schools could do under that law, or excuse me, policy. And even though we voted this down in our committee, which thankfully it was a 5-2 vote, this is not done. Our chairman had opened up the floor for comments because we knew there were people who wanted to testify on this. And we had been receiving public testimony all along. He gave the opportunity for them to come and testify in our committee, and we had no one. But the next day, at our public board meeting, we had at least 3, possibly more, I remember 3 distinctly, people that came and spoke in favor of adding sexual orientation to this list, which no longer exists in the rule anymore, by the way, because we took that out. We replaced it with, in accordance with state and federal law, so that if the law changes, this list changes. If it doesn't change, then it remains what it was, but the thing is, you have to comply with the law anyway. So to say in accordance with state and federal law basically makes it a summary statement of the policy that you're required to abide by. So this testimony was brought forward, and we had somewhere between 4 and 5 of the state board members who publicly stated after these that they would do all that they could to make sure that this was brought before the full board and that it was added so that any teachers, so that, in their words, the best and the brightest teachers could be teaching the best and the brightest students throughout the state without fear of being discriminated against. That's going to be the language of this argument, that they're going to accuse everyone who has a strong belief on how their child should be trained of being discriminatory, a bigot, someone who is uninformed as to the issues of the day. And yet they're overlooking some of these very major concerns, such as that anatomical differences. The fact that for several thousands of years, we've generally accepted that there is a family structure that is not defined by people, it's defined by God. And also the concern over verbiage, just to throw this out here as food for thought. I had someone that I was bouncing this off of and just asked their opinion. They're in law enforcement. And I said, so, this is what they want to do. How do you foresee this affecting the number of discipline cases that we get? And he said, well, just had a thought that comes to mind. Is sexual orientation defined? And I said, no. Why? And he said, well, because if you're saying, I said, I presume that we're meaning attraction to someone of the same sex as yourself, but no, it wasn't defined. He says, well, if my sexual orientation is pedophilia, does that mean that you can't discriminate against me to hire me to teach your children? I said, I'm pretty sure that's not what they were talking about, but I guess we need to make sure it's well defined, don't we, if it ever happens. So there's a very broad door that gets opened with that needs to have a lot of public discussion. And the proper place to do that is in the legislature. But I'm pretty sure that at some point it will probably be coming back up before the state board. That said, just so it's on your radar, there is a pro-homosexual activist group that is moved to Ohio within the last few months, and they originally were aiming to put something on the ballot in the fall to repeal Ohio's one-man, one-woman marriage amendment, which was passed in 2005. And now, I just saw in one of the newspaper clips that I was sent recently that the chairman of the foundation or the organization was saying, we prefer to work through the courts than through public opinion. And someone op-eded that that's because public opinion is still currently about 2/3 in favor of traditional marriage as opposed to homosexual. And so they might fail at the ballot box. But in court, you might be able to change that because we've had a lot of cases lately where different courts struck down states' marriage bans. I just heard one, and I don't remember what state it was. I think it was Oregon, thank you. That I heard yesterday on the radio that the federal judge, I believe it was, struck down their voter-approved definition of marriage in their state. So it's coming, it's something to be aware of, and I think I just have two more quick comments, and then turn it back over to you or take questions or whatever we have time for. My quick comment first is that one of the things that I've enjoyed doing, both some last year and more this year as we've not had as many overwhelming laws to read, is going to the legislature, staying in Columbus over the following day, so that I can go to the legislative House Education meeting the following morning. And obviously they're meeting every week, sometimes a couple times a week, so I don't get down to all of the meetings, but it gave me the opportunity. I've testified on at least one bill and provided written testimony for another, and it gives me the opportunity to kind of find out what they're going to be sending our way next, and also to give some feedback. And I feel like that has really maybe made even a bigger difference than being on the board, where sometimes I'm the lone no vote. But going to the meetings, showing that I'm interested in what they're doing, and talking to them, I feel like it does hold weight with some of our elected members. So that's been encouraging to me. And right now, there is a bill I almost forgot about this.